All right. I've talked about Doom Eternal on the show a couple of times, and not everyone agrees with the changes that Doom Eternal made to combat. But personally, I think all those changes were for the better because it's actually a lot of small changes that makes a very different kind of combat loop at the end of the day. And again, that's not gonna please everyone because it is different, and I totally get that. But for me, I found it way more engaging and a lot less monotonous. Because if there's one thing that I wasn't a huge fan of 2016, it was just how a lot of combat encounters start to feel the same after a while, and it's just combat encounter, and that was kind of it. Whereas here, the differences in combat and also what you do outside of combat makes it a lot more. There's a lot more variety to it, which I like. So the big change is, in comparison, like if you played 2016, you just have this big arsenal of guns, and it's like, okay, I want to use this one because this one's fun, and just go around and, rip and tear, all that good stuff. In Doom Eternal, it's completely different, where your entire arsenal is every gun is useful because every gun has its strengths and weaknesses against different things. So if you see that there's like cacodemons or barons of hell or whatever, you're going to be using very specific weapons to take them out because they have weaknesses based on the gun you're using. And so it just makes every single gun in your arsenal way more useful. And you're also switching weapons constantly, which just makes every combat encounter a lot more varied because you're not just sticking to the super shotgun like you did in 2016. And just, outside of combat, there's a lot of small things. I mean, they added a grappling hook to a shotgun.
I mean, why wouldn't you love that?
I mean, come on. If I could quote Donkey, if I could quote Donkey, there's a grappling hook on a shotgun because this is a good video game. They added some really cool traversal stuff, and y'all know if you've watched the show before, I like me some good traversal stuff. There's like wall climbing, there's monkey bars, there's a dash. Gotta have a dash in every video game.
It's a requirement. Requirement.
But what I love too is how basically your enemies become your resources. So another big change is that there's a lot less health and ammo pickups, and your gun's overall capacity for ammo is a lot lower than it was in 2016. And that's because they gave you some new tools such as like the blood punch, the flame belcher, and the chainsaw that all give you resources from enemies that you kill. So you basically have to use your enemies as like your resources. And it just makes for some really cool combat. So
yeah. It can be like from what I've seen you play and others play, it can be really easy to not shoot an enemy with the right gun at the right time, and you can end up out of resources really quickly with almost no way to bring them back. Like if you run out of stuff and then you didn't gas up your chainsaw enough that you can't get
your chainsaw back. You can get additional gas for your chainsaw, but there's a certain amount of it where it refuels on its own, so you always get one slash that will recharge, but you can get additional ones to help you out. There was never a moment for me, there were moments where like I'm low on resources, but it was never a moment of like this feels unfair. Like it gets to a point where you're playing, like if you're playing Resident Evil, for example, those are games where like you always have enough ammo, but you're never overconfident going into an encounter. And that's what Doom can feel like sometimes, where it's like, oh, I'm low on stuff, but also you have your chainsaw, you have your flame belch or whatever, your blood punch, and that can all like give you back ammo and resources really, really quickly.
Yeah, the aggression is what fuels your rampage. Like you gotta be on a rampage to keep it going.
That's what's so great. It's like 2016 did a decent job of like, if you're out of resources, the worst thing you can do is run away, which fits Doom Guy's character really well, and it fits the type of game they're going for. And here they give you so many more options to give you those resources. And I think a lot of people that weren't a fan of it, I do think there are legitimately people that just weren't fans of it, but I think a lot of people didn't like it because they didn't understand how to use all of the different mechanics and systems.
Well, I actually want to kind of address this point because I was in a conversation with another friend recently about Doom Eternal specifically, and this is going to lead me really well into the next game I want to talk about, of just sequels that are fundamentally different from their last thing. So Doom Eternal is a game that, looking at the trailer and not looking into the gameplay itself of like the very specifics, you would probably think is just like Doom 2016 but more. But the way that combat works in Doom Eternal completely reworks how you play the game. You've got a very different flow of like In Doom 2016, it plays very much like those classic boomer shooters of you have your toolkit, go blow things up. Like, you don't need to keep track of what weapon you're using generally. There'll be better weapons for better situations, but you never really need to rely on like using a varied arsenal, because some people don't enjoy that. Like, some people want to do a shotgun only run. And that's what those games enable, is that kind of like, if you want to set that challenge for yourself and go do a shotgun only run, you can. And Doom Eternal just becomes painful if you try to do that. Like, I think the thing with Doom Eternal is I would never say that it's worse than Doom 2016. In fact, I think Doom Eternal is a far better designed video game, but the end product, I think, is about the same quality level, because Doom Eternal's combat system is great for people that like having to rotate through those different things, like Wyatt does, and like I do, where you want to have that rotation when you're going through and like making sure that you've got your resources and knowing that there's a specific counter to everything that you're doing. But that's also not what boomer shooters were about or have ever been about. So I think the thing is, like, now you find that Doom Eternal is a worse Doom successor than a game like Dusk or a Medieval, which I've also been playing recently, which are like indie Doom clones, quote unquote clones, that have far more classic approaches of like, you've got like 9 weapons, go crazy, go murder rooms full of people, however you can, and that's fun in its own way. So I think it's just like 2 very different styles of fun. And I think that the question typically comes to, like, a fan of Doom 2016 is probably less likely to like Doom Eternal than a fan of other shooter games. Which is the weird thing of, like, it's a weird franchise that they did it to, in that it's the classic boomer shooter franchise is now just a different type of game, which isn't a bad thing.